Hello and welcome to the HPA Tech Retreat Virtual Production Panel. I'm Barbara Marshall from HP Inc.'s Advanced Compute and Solutions Division. I'm delighted to be joined by 5 leading voices from the world of virtual production, and we'll be discussing the current landscape, how it's changing, and what the future holds for virtual and/or remote working. In that spirit, we are indeed practicing what we preach. The entire panel is sitting in a virtual production set at Capture Studios deep in the heart of LA, surrounded by LED screens from 3D Live, featuring this beautiful Mars environment developed in Unreal Engine. And I am being streamed in from my home in sunny Colorado, courtesy of Evercast. Before I ask each panelist to introduce themselves and their work, let me just run through who is virtually here. Derry, producer, inventor, and virtual production consultant. David Karlak, director and immersive storyteller. Brian Frager, technical account manager at Epic Games. Nathan Huber, co-founder and CEO at 3D Live. And Kathryn Brillhart, director of virtual production at USC's Entertainment Technology Center. So let's start with you, Kathryn. Can you tell us a little about yourself and your work?
Sure. I'm a cinematographer, I'm a producer and a director, and my background is kind of one of those that fits perfectly for virtual production. A whole lifetime of experience shooting and being part of a physical production, about 10 years in post-visual effects, and now just kind of blending all those interests together.
Great, thanks, Kathryn. I'm going to ask Nathan now to talk a little about himself.
Hi, I'm Nathan Huber. I'm one of the co-founders at 3D Live. We focus on integrating immersive environments and live performance and live experiences. And we've been also working in the VR AR space, so we're combining digital optics for large groups of audiences, giving them an opportunity to experience VR and AR, which often can feel kind of like a singular experience, solitary experience, but now we're opening it up to large audiences with our LED technology. So we're focusing on that and really just exploring the worlds of technology and figuring out ways to connect all the dots to create sort of the future of out-of-home entertainment.
Thank you, Nathan. It sounds like the world of out-of-home entertainment has an exciting future. Now let's turn to Brian.
I'm Brian Frager. My background is mainly in game engine development and film production, and I've worked for about 10 years at various visual effects studios, helping them with interactive content, virtual reality, augmented reality, data visualization, and also bringing their traditional film pipelines over into the real-time engines. And so I joined Epic after years of doing that, at various studios such as Zoic and Technicolor and MPC to help the wider industry adopt these tools as well.
Thanks, Brian, and congratulations on joining Epic. I was part of the Epic family a few years ago, and it's a really great company, so well done. And David, how about you?
My name is David Karlak. I am a filmmaker and immersive storyteller. I was a creative director of Neuralize, a startup in downtown LA that was acquired by Sony Pictures in 2019. And since then, I've been just charting my own course as a filmmaker, taking everything that I learned being in the crow's nest of a tech startup and learning a lot about virtual reality and real-time image creation and applying those ideas to the sort of like independent film model.
Thanks, David. It's great to have the independent perspective on this panel. And finally, over to you, Glenn.
I'm Derry. I'm sort of the boots on the ground guy here. I develop and invent technology that gets used on a lot of these kinds of productions. I was kind of at the birth of Avatar, helping to put that system together for Jim Cameron, and have since started up a couple of companies doing large-scale virtual production for kind of big Hollywood movies.
Great, thanks, guys. So the first question I have is reflective of the different backgrounds you all have. What does virtual production mean to you? Because it seems to mean different things to different people. And Glenn, perhaps we could carry on with you.
Sure. I mean, for me, virtual production is just modern filmmaking. We're just using new tools. It's a label you had to put on these kinds of things because They didn't exist, 10 years ago on a film set, and somebody had to put a label on it and your name on a call sheet. So I'm a pretty pragmatic guy when it comes to these things. I just look at it as this is how we make movies in this day and age, and this is just a very simple container to sort of like take a bunch of these kinds of techniques and put a name to it.
Right. So, Glenn, you seem to take a broad view of the term. This is how we make movies nowadays. It's not just one technology. David, I'd love to hear the independent angle. What does virtual production mean to you?
For me, virtual production is just a point of convergence in the entertainment industry, where we're seeing a lot of exciting and emerging technologies, from real-time game engine image creation to doing live action camera tracking, etc., and using that to empower storytellers, right? To make movies in ways that were maybe impossible before these technologies existed.
Yeah, I mean, as they mentioned, there are a lot of different pockets of virtual production. I personally am fascinated by this merging of the game and film worlds and finding that common language between two industries that were traditionally very separate. Essentially, what it unlocks as a new medium is this transmedia storytelling, where the assets that you build at a very high quality for a film can also work in a game engine and run at 60 frames per second, so that you can interact with them and create all these other ancillary experiences that really just build out the world of the story.
Great. Thanks, guys. That's really set us up with some interesting conceptual ideas around virtual production. What I'd like to do now is get into the practicalities and have you talk a little bit about specific projects you're working on. And Kathryn, let's start with you.
Okay, I will describe maybe the truck sequence or something from Ripple Effect. That was a really fun shoot to do. We had a large stage, Global Trend Pro Studios. It was the shape of, a U. We got to pull in this big Unimog truck into the middle of the stage, and it felt like a normal, in-studio production, but instead of having to turn the truck frequently, we could turn the world around the truck. We could really pick camera setups in advance, and we were able to come in with a plan because we had all this time to visualize in game engine what we were going to do.
Thanks, Kathryn. So Nathan, turning to you, I know you have quite a different perspective given your events background. Can you talk a little bit about specific projects you're working on?
So for us, we did a pretty interesting project during COVID because, again, a lot of these concert tours got shut down. So what normally would happen every year, there's a Burning Man experience. You guys probably have all heard of Burning Man. So Burning Man went virtual for 2020. And we worked with Infinite Playa, which built out an entire Burning Man world in Unreal. And you could log in via the internet and build your own avatar and run around to all these different stages that everyone built. And then we were in a remote location, obviously a COVID-safe location with an LED display, and we had performers fly in and perform in front of an LED, which had an environment behind them. And then what we could do is capture and present it on Twitch, your standard kind of 2D format where you have, this world. You could log in through the Unreal Engine portal via AWS over the web, and you could have an avatar character that you were walking up to the stage and experiencing through Game Engine. Or if you were in virtual reality, because again, we were working with game engines in virtual production where the LED stopped, the rest was just crew with cameras and stuff, but we could totally replace them with an augmented reality overlay. So now you have a virtual world that you're in VR with your Oculus headset on, and you can look at the performers, but you can then look around here, and now you're in this weird particle fantasy land or whatever of Burning Man wonderment. So that was a cool way for us to kind of combine standard production, virtual production, virtual reality, gaming, and augmented reality overlays, all in a weird live performance for Burning Man. So that was a fun way that we got to mix music with production and virtual. Did that make sense?
It did.
That should be running 24/7.
Well, we're trying to get Facebook in on this thing because, yeah, we got to do that.
Actually, that made me think of one thing on the production front that we were talking about. There's an interesting model emerging of like a hybrid remote / physical production environment, which I think will carry forward beyond the pandemic. You know, it's like people who don't need to be on set probably won't be on set. There'll be less travel of bringing everyone together, because Evercast and other tools like that are enabling people to get direct camera feeds, you know, have a really unique viewport into set, where, you know, in certain instances, it's like watching the NFL from home. Like, it's a better view than if you're at the stadium in the nosebleeds. You know, you get like the direct line of sight into the creative. And so I think that's here to stay, and I hope so.
Thanks, Brian. So, David, I remember talking with you the other day about a short you were working on. We'd love to hear a bit more about it.
So I'm currently using it on an epic mega grant project. It's a short film that I'm directing called Azul, and we have like an armored truck heist, and the prop fabricator lives here in LA, but the truck is in Mexico, and so we just use like a little quick and dirty like Connect scan, and we scan the interior cab of the truck. We send him the data, and he has like a perfect reference for then building the CAD model, right, for a physical prop that's then going to be 3D printed. And same thing for like the cenote that we're going to be shooting in. It's like this underground lake. Like in a cave. It's really hard to get to. It takes like 4 hours, and you can only get there, by foot. But we did a LiDAR capture, and we send that to anyone, that has a VR headset, and they can actually walk through the space and take measurements and look at it. And it's just, it's good enough, right?
I can't wait to see your mobile unit just trekking through the jungle with like a backpack with a drone and a VR headset.
Yeah. I mean, it all fits in a backpack, and that's the key is. Like that's what's so cool. It's like, I'm excited to see like what maybe like Werner Herzog does, with virtual production, right? Somebody like that, or, maybe documentary, production. I mean, like documentaries didn't really take off until like the Nagra, portable sound recorder was created. Technology driving storytelling, or like lightweight cameras gave way to, like the Hollywood new wave. And I think we're seeing like the new wave, with virtual production. Everything we've talked about is just always important to remember that like story is king, and anything that empowers the actor and the stories is the best.
Yeah, you're so right, David, aren't you? That regardless of the technologies and the techniques that we have, at the end of the day, story is still king. So, Glenn, let's turn to you. How are you using virtual production?
Oh, let's see. What are some fun things I've done in the last year? COVID time. All right, number one, you can't fly to Hong Kong to do a location scout. What do? You rip Google Earth maps and you build the location of Hong Kong in Engine so that you can fly around and start picking your locations. That was like day one, intro to COVID. Like how do I location scout these places without actually showing up there? So we built tools to rip Google Earth maps right from the source, which is not supposed to do, but we anyway, drop it right in the engine. But also in that enable the production designer and the art team to use it. So basically build a front end little application to let them drive around and actually start doing their sort of storyboarding and their location scouting themselves without having to have like a team of people around them. So enable them to do it. So that was one of the first things that we did right out of the gate, because one of the movies I was involved with is like heavy location based around the world. It's big epic thriller all over the place. And then cut to a few months later, and we're doing testing and ultimately shooting for an in-house project for a company that's been mentioned a lot here. But I had to do mocap in my backyard. So how do you do that? I'm used to basically building these big stages that we would go out and do motion capture, where we put these retroreflective markers on people's suits, and they've got all these cameras around. It's this big gnarly setup. But we couldn't do that because of COVID. So what do? You hire the neighbor kids to throw some suits on. They're martial artist neighbor kids, while the director's in New York in a different location, and we're streaming all of that live over Evercast so that they can talk through the scene. And we've been spending a lot of time just figuring out how to do things effectively, both at home, but also how to relay and get the feedback from the creative participants, the DP, the director, the production designer, very quickly, and enable those changes very rapidly without needing, the entire brain bar, as we used to call it, like the whole mission control setup. Like, pare that down. What do you actually need? And then enabling them, start building tools for them to do the jobs themselves, so we're not having a handhold through that process so much. That's been a lot of this last year.
So Glenn, yeah, you make a really important point there about the need to train people, and that kind of connects to the idea of accessibility. So Kathryn, I know accessibility is a hot topic for you. You obviously work at USC with students. So can you talk a little bit about how you see making virtual production more accessible to a broader audience?
I mean, there's so many different flavors and types of workflows, that you could join in and be part of. But, I would say right now, training as an Unreal Engine artist, there aren't enough people who are trained in that space. So there are a lot of opportunities for education and jumping in for people who are mid-career, total beginners, people who are seniors who just want to try something new with their craft and push it further. There's just a lot of opportunity.
I mean, the democratization is the fact that Unreal Engine's free.
Right.
Right? A lot of these things that we use for set planning now don't require an infrastructure and a facility and all the sort of back end that a larger company or a larger infrastructure, even a few years ago, would have been required. You can do a lot at home in real time, again, as Kat was saying, on commodity hardware, and it's free. I mean, it's out there. Blender's free, Unreal is free, Substance Designer is pretty darn cheap. You can just get busy, now and effectively be able to emulate and try things out. I mean, that's the cool part I find with the virtual production. It's really the virtualization of what you guys are all sitting around here doing right now. I can put a camera in these spaces in a virtual reality environment and emulate what I would do on the live action set before I get there. That for me is huge, because it lets you try things out. It lets you be dangerous. It lets you try ideas that you wouldn't be able to do in any other way. That's the democratization that I'm most impressed with, and what I'm really looking forward to is because, again, in the past you had to roll film, right? Film costs money. It costs money for processing. You had to have a relationship with a lab. You don't have to do any of that anymore, right? Everyone's got an iPhone in your pocket. You can get out there and shoot, right? Well, this is the next layer to that. Anybody can go download Unreal and Blender and begin to get the concept of what it is to put your own 3D visual effects together. And you can use it for set planning, you can use it for post, but it's all the same toolkits, and it's the same toolkits that the big boys use. It's no different. It's all the same stuff. So that to me is what's really fascinating.
As Glenn said, Epic Games in the Unreal Engine is free to anyone to download, and it is the same engine that the professionals are using. So that's what's kind of cool about it is, people can take the initiative to train up on these tools that will empower them to step onto a film set and be future-proofed in their job. Anyone who has a role on a traditional film set, there's a place in virtual production, because when you get on set and you see the various units interacting, it really is like filmmaking the video game, or it's like The Sims filmmaking, where everyone has their role. There's still someone who has to set the lights. There's still someone who's controlling the camera. And the barriers to entry have, or that's what Epic's really tried to do over the last few years, is eliminate those barriers to entry. Even with the acquisition of Quixel, releasing these really high quality assets to the world, because 3D asset creation is very hard. And so being able to pull down from a library of scanned objects, build your own environments, and place virtual cameras. There's an iPad remote viewer that anyone can set up at home. And sure, the video routing and the amount of people that might be in a collaboration session gets more complex as the size of the show expands, but the same skills apply, and that's what's exciting about it. And I mean, Glenn can speak to the evolution, but these tools have never been easier to pick up.
So Glenn's just made the point that the tools like Unreal Engine and Blender have democratized the ability to make content. Just curious, Nathan, whether they've had the same impact in the world of live events.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, our company, we focus mostly on concert tours and theme park attractions. And so in some ways, the Unreal Engine, I mean, we started using Unreal, working in VR and AR, and then we were like, wait, we're doing a concert tour with this band. Why don't we build all the material for the display in Unreal Engine for the concert tour space? And so then we started realizing, okay, as we're working with other major tours and whatnot, they started implementing Stipe and Black Tracks, which is for tracking of the performers in front of the displays, for lighting, and then also using the live cameras during your onstage productions with, say, like Beyonce or someone. They're shooting and they're tracking the cameras, and that's running through Notch or through Unreal or Unity, all of these game engines. And then within the last 2 years is really when everyone, obviously COVID threw a major force of energy into using LEDs for virtual production. And so now you've got groups like us that have all these displays that we've been developing for concert tours. And so we work in the space of developing display technology, and so you go to your manufacturers and say, hey, I need a certain color space. So now we're getting more draws saying, hey, don't just build a standard touring LED. I want Rec 709, I want Rec 2020. I want to have super high frame rates. A lot of these LEDs now, you're generating 3,800 to 4,000 hertz a second, so you can really push crazy frame rates, which are great for all the different types of cameras you might be using in virtual production based on what frame rate you're shooting at. So I mean, things are getting to a point where the markets for concert tours are funding development for display systems that are used in production, and now eventually with Samsung and everybody racing to replace the projection systems that are in all the old cinema houses. Now you'll have the best possible color on set for cameras, and then in theaters they're going to get rid of these junky old projectors and put in these beautiful new cinema LED displays that can produce better color space, better contrast, better brightness, better frame rates without any flickering from a projector. So again, it's weird. It's everything is funneling. Even cryptocurrency is pushing the development of GPUs.
One really interesting stat that I heard was that before 2020, in 2019, there were something like 3 LED stages in the world, and going into 2021, we're now pushing 200.
Wow.
So the pandemic was a hell of a forcing function to bring all this technology together and make it serviceable for storytelling, because it was the only way to tell stories in some instance last year. When you can't travel a crew around the world, you can't visit the real locations, you have to bring the locations to you. And luckily we're at a place where the technology is enabling that, and the pixel density on these walls that you've been working with forever are just getting to the point where they are good enough for cameras to capture. So it's an amazing confluence that's not easy to set up. But to Glenn's point, there will be standing facilities around the world that have them set up so that productions can roll through and just bring their content, deploy it, and hopefully in the long run abstract away the technical networking layer so that it's more just like come in, grab your content, roll off stage in a very organized pipeline manner.
Thanks, Brian. And yeah, you're absolutely right. We've seen an explosion in LED screens and virtual production sets, I'm guessing as a result of COVID, which brings me to the question, how has COVID impacted everybody?
Well, I mean, we're all working at home. I mean, like right there.
We're actually not here right now. We're holographic projections.
I mean, practically speaking, I'll be the boots on the ground guy. A lot of our work in the last couple years has really been about communication. Obviously, we're not bringing artists, and in some cases, last year we weren't filming on sets. That's changing, of course, due to the very stringent health protocols that have come through. But the show must go on, right? People want entertainment. The beast must be fed. So how do you do that? And obviously one of the first things that happened, and the easiest to a degree, was all the visual effects companies and anybody who was starting to create this virtual production content, if you will, all started working from home. How do you communicate? What does that look like? And in my world, more importantly, how do you get the key creatives to communicate and express themselves and move around and make actual functionable decisions about the content that they're creating or that they're being involved in and the stories they're trying to tell on a day in, day out pragmatic basis? Basically, how do you do pre-pro during COVID, right?
Yeah.
And so actually I think the sponsor here, Evercast, I use it literally every single day. It's part of my day-to-day workflow. I have a virtual room that I've set up where I have all my artists drop in and out of. They all have their screens, their views of what they're doing up, and I'm able to select between them and kind of like, as though I were standing behind them as I normally would, as I was sort of going through set design or any of these things. I can stand behind them virtually, see what they're doing, catch up with them. It's very natural. It's very fluid. It's not like this set scheduled meeting, which is really fun. I think we've all kind of, we've all been living Zoom for long enough now. I know my life becomes these little chunks of 1 hour time chunks of Zoom meetings, right? Which can be overwhelming to a degree, but I think that there is an amount of, though, I personally love having this sort of aspect of this room, this virtual room that I'm in, and I've just got people bouncing in and out of. And then, the key creatives are gonna get on, the DP, the director, the production designer, great. They have machines at their house. We have artists help them onto their machines. They get into VR, they scout their set, their virtual set, the set that we're gonna ultimately build. They're at home, they're communicating over their headsets, over their VR, they're talking about the set, they're making animation decisions, they're starting to make blocking decisions, and they're doing all of that, in their pajamas, right? So, and that's fundamentally what's changed, is just that setup and that dynamic, I think, is really cool, because obviously the next level to that is I can be working with anybody around the world. I don't have to necessarily drive an hour and a half through LA traffic every day to go sit at a specific facility to do this work. I can be at home working naturally when it matters to the key creatives on the project, and they can still feel like they're interacting and having that participatory nature, because it's live, it's now, and they're doing it in virtual reality. That's how we've been working.
I can definitely speak to shooting during COVID. That was this entire ripple effect project. It was August, September, July of this year, and it was around the time where everything, Hollywood, everything was shut down, and we had to figure out, how to greenlight insurance for the project. So, we ended up leveraging Unreal Engine with Digital Film Tree, a visualization company, and created Safety Viz for our team. And we made sure that we had an interactive experience that we also helped develop with ICVR, so that we could sort of enter in all of the COVID data that we had acquired kind of worldwide and for different counties and things, and create an interactive experience that would help us plan for the worst. So it was interesting to be able to, in first person, kind of drive through to, one, make a pitch to insurance companies, but two, also give safety materials to our team, or even create a 2D overhead map of the game plans for the day that we could attach to a call sheet.
Wow, Kathryn, that really paints a great picture of the use of this technology. Fascinating. And it brings me to the final topic about what does the future hold in, say, the next 5 years. Let's start with you, Brian.
Put on my crystal ball. I think that we're going to see a lot more intuitive and turnkey solutions. So it's still not easy to the point that it should be. Even though it's democratized and accessible, it's not easy. So I think the tools will get simpler to turn on and start capturing meaningful data. We'll see the integration of artificial intelligence in many different ways, in terms of building environments, populating those sets with, non-playable characters, because, what's the point of animating 100 background extras when you can just give them some basic parameters and let them, talk amongst themselves or whatever you need them to do. And so, the confluence of these technologies are going to be very, very interesting to watch. And then, of course, just elevating the visual quality of, the lighting, rendering, shading, and the representation of virtual humans to ever closer physically accurate levels. So I think we'll see all those things swirling together. And then, the stage environments, the in-camera visual effects, I think are here to stay. They'll obviously keep getting up-res. Those will get simpler with the setup. One thing that'll be interesting also is, right now, a lot of broadcast solutions use real-time compositing to put in foreground elements. And then, the film and television pipelines are using the LED backdrops to composite real foregrounds against virtual backgrounds. But the merging of those two, where you're driving virtual backgrounds, you have some physical foreground elements, and then you can also composite virtual foreground elements seamlessly, kind of completes that circle and really gives you like maximum flexibility to do what you need on stage.
Thanks, Brian. And I'm going to turn to Nathan now.
Well, outside of the deep fakes, which we all know are going to get weird, they already are. Right?
They already are, man.
Yeah, they
Tom
are.
Cruise ones are bananas.
I think kind of piggybacking on what Brian said is, you mentioned foreground, and I was kind of talking about how we were doing that with the Burning Man virtual production, which we could kind of have the background, but then also extend that in an environment around you. So I think those things are going to be working their way, obviously, in the cinema and everything, but it's moving into outside spaces too, which is some places that we're in, which is, what is the future of cinema? As we all know, the future of cinema has to change because COVID drastically accelerated the reduction of attendance to cinemas, which was already on its way down. So I think what we're going to see is a new type of out-of-home entertainment space that'll be standard traditional cinema, but then also potentially new formats of cinema, which are powered by Unreal or all these other different tools and the VR and the AR space, but then also the pop-ups that are happening where you for a month before this movie comes out, you can go to Avatar Land and play with avatars or go to whatever the movie is, and so I think those will be happening outside of Hollywood. They'll be happening around the U.S. and there'll be these new sort of out-of-home cinema-like advanced forms of entertainment that'll be utilizing those assets that you guys built inside the movie and now bringing them to audiences and giving them a reason to get off the couch. So I think that's probably another thing that is going to be powered by virtual production.
Wow, that's a pretty inspiring future. Thank you. So, Kathryn, what about you?
Okay, so from a technical standpoint, I actually really agree with Brian about how, it's not necessarily super easy, even though it's democratized. So I think we will have all these different technologies be working together in a more streamlined way. I think in the next 5 years, there'll be more documentation that's user guides and technical guides, on the technical guides pushing, the highest level of cinematic standards and, color management and calibration, that sort of thing, and user guides so that a producer or a studio or companies can say or a DP could say oh, I gotta go on set, how do I prep? This is what I need to do to prep. And I think that's in the works right now. So I think 5 years from now, it'll be amazing to see that groundwork. But then from a creative perspective, I'm excited 5 years from now to hear new creative perspectives and point of views through cinema, because I feel like a lot of the things that we watch that are still pitched and shown us through Netflix and all these different distribution platforms are coming from a traditional production pipeline. And so I'm really excited to see how more people with more diverse backgrounds tell different stories and change my life because I have access to new perspectives that I might not get to see all the time.
Yeah, that's a good point, Kathryn. Thank you. And over to you, David.
I think that the virtual production stage will just become the movie theater. In a lot of ways, minus the screens. You're spending all this money, hundreds of millions of dollars on creating these assets. If you just do a little bit more work, you can give them to people as merchandise and they can make stuff with it. It's no different than a kid playing with, Legos and imagining a story and then maybe recording it on his iPhone. Now you have film quality assets and you're able to, voice the characters and make crowdsourced films that, could be better than the original. To me, that's really cool, right? This idea that you get to play with the same exact tools that the filmmakers got to play with in VR. I definitely see that being a thing in 5 years, right? But ultimately, screens are going to get brighter, they're going to get denser. VR, same thing, is going to become more ubiquitous. But I definitely see like just a new breed of story, like a new kind of story, like a crowdsourced story where people get to define for themselves, what these characters mean and what this world means to them. That's why people love Star Wars. It's not because of necessarily like the movie, but it's then your imagination within that world that somebody else created, where that takes you, giving like that element of creative authorship to like an 8-year-old kid is going to be so cool.
I was just going to say, we've seen that a bit at Epic, even when we finish a sample project and try to show, chart a course for how to use these new tools, and then oftentimes we'll try to release it to the community. And we recently did so with the Meerkat demo that was in collaboration with Weta, and it was to show the new control rig, and it was all rendered in real time. But within an hour of releasing that project, someone had released a new version of it that was all from the Meerkat's point of view. So
I love it.
It's using the same world, the same assets, and a completely different perspective on it, which really like speaks perfectly to the remixability of these stories and the fact that like people can put their own stamp on it.
So modding at its best there, Brian. Finally, Glenn, how about you?
All right, 5 years. So here's the thing. Hollywood's kind of slow. I love Hollywood, it's awesome, but Hollywood is really driven by tradition, and it's a much slower uptake on technology than you would think. Like, I've been working on this stuff for 20 plus years, doing various flavors of this, and I'm going to say even now, some of the stuff that we were developing, again, 20 years ago, is just now kind of starting to become relatively accessible and mainstream. So I'm going to be a little bit more pragmatic. Here's what I think is going to actually hit. I think we're going to get depth compositing. I actually think we're going to get live depth compositing, which is a big deal. That means that there's going to be a device on those cameras, I'm looking at these cameras here, that can actually tell me how far away an object is from the screen. And I'm going to be able to do these foreground, background layers live, right? Which will allow us to do effectively seamless, we call it simulcam, but seamless virtual to real compositing. That is going to hit. That's a real thing. It's already being worked on some big name movies, but that will happen practically. These LED walls will become ubiquitous. Why? Because there's going to be enough of them out in the world that people are going to be able to roll in and actually start using. So the infrastructure of talent around being able to generate assets to actually put up on the walls will start growing because they're available. Honestly, that's what we're in right now. The big trick right now is to start building a talent pool of people using this stuff day in, day out. And we want to enable, we talk a lot about enabling creatives and enabling the storytellers. Well, there's only one DP on a movie, there's only one director on a movie, and there's only one production designer on a movie. But there's a lot of people building assets and a lot of people building infrastructure and things around that. The crew themselves that have to go in. So a lot of construction department, right? Well, we need more construction department out there building these things that we can all, actually use. And that to me is what I see really happening is a lot of people learning this stuff because A, it's exciting, B, it's very liberating, and C, you'll be able to actually pay your bills doing it. So that's what I see the next 5 years being.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you to all of you for a really enlightening and interesting panel. So what I'm hearing is so much enthusiasm from you all. Enthusiasm for the way virtual production is democratizing our industry. Enthusiasm for the creative control it's giving you, and even IP control and control over the skills that are needed. It's great to see this enthusiasm for the future. Once again, thank you to everyone, Glenn, David, Brian, Nathan, and Kathryn for joining this panel, Evercast for putting it together, and I'm Barbara Marshall from HP. Thank you to everyone who's listening in.